Bitcoin has hit some massive, girthy, significantly new all-time highs. In this case, Bitcoin actually making a very slightly new all-time high at just above 112,000 US dollars. But it is a new all-time high. We did say that Wednesday is a damn good day for that based upon the daily price statistics. And in today's video, I want to be following up on this. Effectively, the same setups that we've been looking at for the past 2.5 to 3 weeks now, slowly but surely coming to fruition. And we'll go over what those price targets are, when to expect them effectively, and also an invalidation. In fact, we'll start it off with the most important thing, how to invalidate this, how to effectively validate that Bitcoin is putting in a trap here and heading lower. And we're just going to be moving up the daily price action pivot from yesterday's video at 107,300 now to yesterday's low, meaning that as long as Bitcoin is closing above Wednesday's low on a daily time frame basis, the path of least resistance is almost undoubtedly to the upside. Again, as long as that condition is met. If Bitcoin does close below Wednesday's low, then, same thing as before, probably looking at a nice quick move to about 105, bounces along the way, probably fails there and comes all the way down to the very, very low 100s, and then we come back and look at it with fresh eyes. But for right now, Bitcoin following through to the upside. And let's go look at today's price action statistics, because Thursday is a pretty uneventful day. Actually, it has the lowest positive and negative returns out of any weekday. In fact, even comparable with the weekend slumber party that we typically get. And in terms of whether Thursday is even likely to close positively or negatively, it's very, very close to a coin flip's probability, slightly in favor of negative closures here. But I want to call attention to the fact that Thursday actually has the lowest negative return. So if Bitcoin does pull back a little bit today, it's not like a death sentence or anything like this. Again, yesterday's low is the big pivot now. As long as Bitcoin's above there, I have a bullish bias. I continue to have a bullish bias. Bitcoin goes below there, it's a corrected bias for sure at best for a while. Anyways, to put these numbers into perspective, today's daily range on average, we do expect, highs if Bitcoin does try another upside move somewhere around 113.5, which would be some nice new all-time highs again. And to the downside, the average returns would bring us back down to about 109,400. Again, if Bitcoin came back down around there, that's not terrible. It's only when Bitcoin closes below Wednesday's low, that's the point where I'd say, hey, this thing is not going to be following through to the upside anytime soon. Get ready for a correction much lower. Anyways, to now follow up on a lot of the setups that we've been looking at on this channel, I want to go to perhaps the biggest and baddest one, the one that we've been looking at on this channel similarly for the past 3 years now, maybe 4 years, I think going back to 2021. And this is the 2-day and the 5-day volatility versus stochastic momentum setup. I'm going to continue to update the setup as it comes to fruition, because these setups are basically what drives all Bitcoin's big, massive mega moves. And anytime that we've seen, a massive move to the upside or the downside, it's been off the back of these setups almost always, in fact. And you really only get them, 3-ish times a year, sometimes 4, sometimes 2, but around 3, let's say. We'll cut it to the middle. Anyways, the setup that we're looking at is when volatility on these time frames, the 2-day and the 5-day, gets to extreme lows, which are defined as anything below 15 percentile. And then we look for volatility expansion, which means that the BBWP here, we need to get back above 15 percentile. And at that moment, we can then reference the direction of the stochastic oscillator for these time frames for a very high probability direction for a major move. On the lower end, we're talking around 20%. On the upper end, we're talking about 50, 60%. So in this case right here, the 2-day time frame did just close last night. And as of right now, we do not see full-on volatility expansion. However, we do see the first biggest explosion of volatility in the past couple months, since late May, actually. So, I guess it is of somewhat significance. And I mean, it should really be focused on here that this sort of low volatility levels that we've seen for the 2-day time frame for this long have just not been seen in many years. I mean, you could kind of compare this, I guess, to 2023 right here, but even that, I'd say, is not necessarily the same thing. Maybe the most comparable one would be from the late October. In this case, it was a downside move. Again, it is direction neutral after all. But as you can see right here, it is potentially going to do it maybe on the next close or two. So it's really now time to be paying attention to these setups, because when they fire off, they're going to fucking move very, very fast. And we're looking at, like I said, on the lower end, a 20% move, on the upper end, 50% plus move. But again, until we actually get that volatility expansion confirmation with the BBWP, this theoretically could flip around into a downside setup. But for right now, the 2-day time frame new momentum pivot is 107,006. 107 $7,600. So as long as Bitcoin's above there, at least for this next period, it's going to continue to favor the upside. When we go into this data right here, I've gone through each and every one of these past signals for the 2-day and the 5-day timeframes. And I'm just looking at the long setups right here, by the way. And for the 2-day timeframe, there has been 21 prior times in Bitcoin's history we've seen this setup, and 17 of those times when the stochastic oscillator was positioned to the upside while volatility expansion was simultaneously happening, we saw a massive fucking move to the upside. This is just for the 2-day timeframe, by the way, with an average return of just under 28%, standard deviation of about 10 and a quarter, giving us a first standard deviation between about 18% all the way up to 39%. So that's big. And this is just for the 2-day timeframe. So if we were to look at this and add about 20% to the upside, again, that's the lower end, assuming that this one does resolve to the upside, that puts Bitcoin above $133,000. That's dare I say big. It's very big. It's very, very nice. Very huge, humongous, massive. Some people say that they've never seen a move that big in their life. It's crazy. Who knows? Anyways, the 5-day setup, being that it is a higher term time frame, is much more powerful and typically lasts longer. By the way, for the 2-day time frame setup, if and when it does fire off, on average, it takes about 19 days until the next major high. If we go to the 5-day time frame, again, being that it is a higher term time frame, it does imply that the results will also be bigger. We see the same thing over here, 5-day BBWP at extreme lows for, a decent amount of time as well. And as of right now, the 5-day stochastic oscillator is positioned to the upside still. And this one just got a new closure last night. The new pivot is about 109. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is that, look, if you are bullish, you really have to be expecting Bitcoin is going to follow through from here. Like we've been saying this week, we have now seen new all-time highs this week, but it is absolutely imperative between today and the next 5-day closure we see more continuation, at least in my opinion, if these setups really are going to work out. Now, for the 5-day setup, we have seen these things. How many times? We've seen them 16 times in Bitcoin's history, and all 16 times when we've seen the 5-day stochastic oscillator position to the upside, those have resolved in major upside moves. And we're talking on average over 41%, with a standard deviation of about just under 12%. So we have a first standard deviation zone between about 30% to 53%, which is fucking massive. Again, we already went over what 20% would look like on top of current price action. What would 50% look like on top of current price action? And, again, this would be the upper end of things. I mean, for example, 40% already puts you at 153, 154 region. I need to raise the roof here, I guess. 50% puts you where? About 167-ish region. So again, if you are bullish, I do think you really can't expect Bitcoin even below yesterday's low. Otherwise, that's going to imply that, again, consolidation sideways and down first. And we could actually apply these models to the downside as well. Now, the numbers will be different, obviously, but they will still imply, some pretty sizable downside moves. I would say on the lower end, 15% to the downside. On the upper end, about 35% to the downside, using about 110 as a marker there. So that, that could easily be back down to like low 80s if it were to play out in such fashion. But like I said, as long as both of these momentum oscillators are positioned, in this case, to the upside, I'm going to be bullish. Like, it just has to be. It just, it is what it is. And then we can go into our other models as well. But yeah, for the 5-day time frame model, by the way, this one on average takes about 34 days from it firing off, which it is not done just yet. But it takes 34 days from that date to reach the next major mega high. So, we're talking about upon confirmation. If it were to happen on the next closure, we're looking at the next major new all-time high late August for Bitcoin, and probably a good amount of that explosive move done, I would imagine, before July even ends. But yeah, still a bit of waiting to go here. These setups are going to be combined with our other favorite setup on this channel, which is the 5-day 5 EMA setup. Again, we're using the Quant Prime service here to backtest this one. This one's a little bit more easily backtestable compared to the other one. The other one is, there's not really like a good closing edition that we can use. But this one right here, if I'm just testing the past 10 years, you can see that this setup has caught every major trending move for Bitcoin. Again, if you've been on this channel even for the past year, you've seen this fire off many times. In fact, you saw it fire off here in early April, catching the move from $83,500 all the way to 110. Not bad. We saw a couple more in the year prior on this mega move from 63,000 all the way up to 110 as well. And then before that, we saw it in 23 and 24 a couple of times. It does catch all of the big massive moves. Yes, it did just happened relatively recently. We have in the past actually seen 2 winners in a row, but it does have a relatively low probability to produce a winning trade at 40%. So 32 out of 80 prior total iterations have produced profitable trades. But because the profit factor is so damn high, and because the average loss is, relatively low, we do have a very, very nice equity curve here. If we go into the trade analysis, we can see that the average winning trade has returned 37.5%, which is very much in alignment with that prior model right here. And this one, by the way, is already fired off. If you can't tell, from the enter long signal right there, like Jesus Christ. But yeah, this one fired off at about $106,000. Obviously, it's in the money as of right now, but it requires Bitcoin to remain above, very specifically, that red moving average, which is a 5 EMA. That is currently positioned at 109,400. So as long as Bitcoin is closing above there, setup is still active, setup is still viable, setup still favors the upside alongside confluence with these setups over here too. But the second that Bitcoin's closed below, like I said, I want to have a major warning signal here, because Bitcoin can easily put in a move back down to like $101,000. Again, there would be bounces along the way, but like I said, volatility cuts both ways, of course. Anyways, this particular setup, I should also add, does take on average 10 bars to play out on a 5-day time frame, which would be 50 days. This one again is already fired off, so that would be pointed us towards about the early mid portion of August, let's say. So yeah, that is in there, and because this one's already fired off, and we do know the average return is about 37%, we can already come up with an area of interest, and that would be about $145,000. We see many things coming around these regions. We're even going to find a few more. If we go over here to the 3 week time frame, I want to acknowledge that CME is closing the next 3 week dildo tomorrow. And 2 things are potential here. One, we might very well see a 3 week time frame bullish engulfing dildo, massive, girthy, humongous, tremendously impressive one, and that will be confirmed if Bitcoin closes on CME above 110,890. Right now, it's trading about $1,000 above that number. And so that will be one. That'll be pretty big deal in my opinion. And then the second important thing here is that Bitcoin on the 3 week time frame will have a chance to actually reclaim the median, which my cursor is currently on. The reason why that is significant is because anytime that Bitcoin has reclaimed it on a closing basis, we have seen at minimum a move up to the next level, which is the 38.2 level, and in many cases has actually gotten significantly higher than that, towards the 50% or the 61.8 levels that you see right here. So as of right now, that 38.2 level is, guess where? It's coming in around all of those same other targets, about $138,000. And again, Bitcoin just needs to close tomorrow above the median, which is 104,660, which seems likely to me. Crazy things do happen in the markets, obviously, but that seems well, we'll see. Don't want to hold my breath too much on this one. Anyways, of course, these things will change around, these ranges, I should say. Naturally, they will change around when we do get the next open. So I'm curious to see where it comes in on tomorrow. Sorry, not on tomorrow, but on Monday when you get the next open for the 3 week time frame on CME. But yeah, just looking at a quick back test here visually, anytime Bitcoin's reclaimed that, it's gotten a nice, very, 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 very nice move to the upside. Again, it is relatively new, so it's like, how much do you trust it on these earlier iterations right here? Probably not much, but hey, it's the best that we can do with the information that we do have at the moment. So, that's all that we can do, or at least that's all that I can do, because at the end of the day, that's all I care about is statistics and setups, and everything else, in my opinion, is just absolute fucking hogwash, bullshit, hocus pocus, nonsense. But here is the real setup. It's the moons. And we have a bull moon. So if there ever was a time to break out, this is the real setup right here. Again, if you're not familiar with this, it's a very, very simplistic setup. I know it sounds fucking crazy and ridiculous, and you probably think I'm a redact, and I am a redact, but also, statistics work even for redacts. And when we look at the statistics for this one right here, just opening when there is a bull moon or full moon, and then closing that 2 weeks later, you can see that over time it has produced a nice up and to the right equity curve, which we like. 55% of those setups have been profitable, 55 out of 100 total setups, by the way. And this one fired off just last night, actually. In fact, we're waiting for today to close for that long signal to go off. But yeah, that one is in there. And again, this one does have a 2 week or 14-day open to close time. That one's always going to be consistent right there. But what we're interested in is the average winning trade and the average losing trade. The average winning trade returns about 13.5%. The average losing trade losing about 8%. So even with this, even if it does lose, it gives us areas of interest for a downside move as well as an upside move within the next 14 to 15 days. So 14 days out from now puts us where? That puts us into the last week of this month of July. 13.5% to the upside would put Bitcoin obviously on new all-time highs at around 126 to 127,000 bucks. Again, these are averages. If you're an internet retard, and I mean this in a very loving way. If you're an internet retard who does not understand probabilities, please understand and statistics just in general. Averages have variance. Some are going to be on the lower end. Some are going to be on the upper end. Some are going to be right on the fucking dot. Some of them are going to be completely outliers. It happens. We're just going off of general areas of interest. So hold your fucking horses before you have some sort of a spasm on your computer with all sorts of things that probably no one's going to read anyways. Anyways, to the other side, 8%, if Bitcoin were to play out the downside narrative of this, an 8% move to the downside would look around about 102,000 bucks, give or take a little bit from that number. So those would be your two major areas of interest depending upon whether this plays out to the upside or the downside. Again, I do personally have a bullish bias based off of the things that we spoke about earlier. And then on top of all of this, we haven't even really spoken much about this recently because it happened. I guess this happened last week, or no, it happened this week. Where did it happen? Yeah, no, it happened whatever. It happened recently, okay? It happened recently, and we did see on the price action pivots indicator that a nice falling channel or regression channel was kind of being formed right here. Something like this. You can see the upwards boundary right here, and then you can see the lower boundary right here. And Bitcoin broke that to the upside. This was Wednesday of last week officially, and has been using that same area as a nice buoy zone, a nice buffering zone, a nice bouncy zone for price ever since then. And again, as long as Bitcoin's above, riding this here, which is again above yesterday's low, Wednesday's low, that is, then upside is just more like the direction. And we can make an implied move based upon this. Let's see what it would effectively be, and this would be somewhere around 118,500 bucks, give or take a little bit from that number again. So many things do point to the north side. I don't want to paint it as a picture that's 100% guaranteed or anything like this, because there's no 100% guarantees. Again, the conditions for applying a lot of these models to the downside, I think, are super, super clear and super, super obvious right here. Again, below yesterday's low, look, this thing wants to go lower. That's okay. But until that happens, my bias remains the upside. And I guess we should just continue to watch this molasses unravel, because this has been the slowest moving breakout I've ever seen in my life, which maybe not the worst thing, to be fair. But yeah, we really would be expecting continuation, I would say, within this next 5-day spread starting today. So what that brings us into when? That brings us into Tuesday/Wednesday of next week. If you don't see new all-time highs by then, I would start to be a little bit concerned. I'd start to maybe look to the other side, perhaps. Anyways, I think that's a good place for me to be leaving off on this particular video. Tomorrow we'll be back with another live stream analysis. What else do I want to say? I think that's basically it. Yeah, and I'll leave this video here for a while because a lot of changes are happening very, very soon. Lots of changes. Oh, many changes, many new things. But until then, I want to say a massive thank you for joining in as always. I forgot, however, to go over the quantum wave bands. There's been a couple of new trades over here. Last week was actually surprisingly active, taking a lot of these short scalps, having a lot of small wins, having a couple of losses as well. Did take a loss. No, it had a small win earlier this week. Yeah, a small loss before that as well, and then had a really nice win right here from Tuesday's low at about 108,420. Great number, closing basically on the high thus far at 111,800. Not bad. I'll put it that way. But yeah, if you're interested in trying out the quantum wave bands, it is more of a done for you newbie friendly type script here. You don't have to trade it in exactly the way that it's showing. You can obviously apply your own spin to it. In fact, you should be doing that. But you can try it for free for 7 days in the link in the description below for Teachable for the quantum wave bands. There's no code or nothing like this needed. You can just get 7 days and see if you like it, see if you don't like it, and then make the decision for yourself. And I will sign off on that note. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Friday.